Today on People I Know show, Curt Carstensen here, being joined by Matt Schneider, co-founder of City Dads Group. Good afternoon, Matt.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me on your show.
Thank you. And I suppose people watching or listening might be watching this at the middle of the night or whenever people decide to tune into People I Know show. You're joining me from New York today, but we met for the first time right at the end of September. You were in Minneapolis, where I am at times an Uber and Lyft driver, and I happened to pick you up and give you a ride from a convention to the airport, and I got to know a lot about you that day. Describe for me again and for the audience what you were doing in Minneapolis in late September.
I was in Minneapolis for the National At-Home Dad Convention, which is now called Home Dad Con. It's been around for 20 plus years in various forms, but it really is a conference for dads that are the primary caregivers for their family, which I have been for the last 14 years.
And as you were explaining this to me that day, it came as news to me. It wasn't like it's inconceivable that this exists, but it's just something I'd never given much thought to, knowing that, yeah, there's going to be some stay-at-home dads and primary caregiving dads out there, but that there was an organization that seems to be growing larger and larger to really great extents throughout the country, and that one of the people that founded it was in my car, so I got to learn quite a bit that day. And you're labeled as a co-founder, so how did that all come together whenever it did?
Well, there's two separate organizations. This was Home Dad Con. It was started and is hosted by the National At-Home Dad Network, which I did not start, which has been around for a long time. I started, it's called City Dads Group. It started in New York City with our first meetup group for what we thought would be at-home dads. We eventually opened it up to dads of all stripes, but our City Dads Group network includes a group in Minneapolis. So they were kind of the host group. So I was there not only as an at-home dad, but we were working with the At-Home Dad Network as Twin Cities Dads Group.
And you said 14 years now you've been the primary caregiver, I suppose, or stay-at-home dad. And I do recall that we talked about this a bit in my car that day as I drove you to the airport. Can you go through your life story a little bit to explain how that developed for you? And then maybe later we'll get into some of the examples that you have come across from other dads.
Yeah, no, my wife and I, before we even got married, as we were thinking about getting married, we talked about what we wanted our life to be like. How would we earn money? Who would be doing laundry and making meals and taking care of children and if we had them? So all of those important conversations that should be even more important than planning the napkins and the tablecloths and the glasses before a wedding. But we both had moms that stayed at home for a good portion of our childhoods, and both of us liked that. And both of us thought we might want to have that for ourselves. So when we eventually did have children, I was teaching. I was a public school teacher, PS 86 in the Bronx. And I thought I'd be taking a year off to be at home with our kids. But 14 years later, it's worked for our family to have my wife being out in the world working. She works what we call a big job. She needs to be the one that doesn't get the call from the nurse and is able to travel when she needs to. And I'm the one kind of focused on the home front, but really we are in an ongoing conversation about our lives as a whole. And I may be lead on this and she may be lead on that, but really we're building a whole life together.
Since being the stay-at-home dad is kind of unusual or maybe very unusual, does it for you, did it? And commonly when you talk to the other dads that join your organization, is it because financially the two-parent household, the one parent was making more money? So why would you, if you wanted to have someone stay at home, why would you quit the job that pays more? And that's the way it comes together? Is that usually the case? And what are the other situations you've heard of?
Yeah, I think that's the good thing about the time we're living in now. We're less focused on traditional gender roles. So each family can kind of make these decisions for ourselves. I mean, really, it's a privilege to even be able to even consider having one person step away from the workforce entirely and have one person um, focused entirely on breadwinning. So starting from that point, the people that are able to do that, sometimes there's a lot of choices that have to be made, lifestyle choices, plans to be able to only live on one income. It happens to be that I made less money than my wife does, or I would make less money than my wife does, but that wasn't the primary factor. It really was about wanting to have one of us at home. And if we pursued my career in a different city, then maybe we could have made that happen. But in New York, um, her career was the one that was going to allow us to live here. And I think just personality wise, I was more excited about being in the role. And I think that's part of it also. It's not just about um, not wanting childcare, not wanting to have your kid in daycare. It's about being excited about experiencing life with your kids as they're growing up. And that's been a real joy for me to have that, to be in that role.
Can you describe the first year or two? You mentioned you thought you were taking a year off from work initially, and it's turned into 14, at least work in the traditional sense. Explain those first couple of years, then how those conversations maybe would have gone and how it did really turn into what it has become.
It was hard. It was definitely a hard transition, and I can look back much more than at the time, but and recognize that I was pretty isolated. I was out in the world. I was Max's dad. I did not have my own name, and I didn't really have a lot of connection with people. We took a bunch of art classes and gym classes and language classes and all that, not because I ever thought those would be of tremendous benefit to my 3-month-old child, 6-month-old child, 9-month-old child. It's because I needed to be meeting people, seeing people, connecting with people. And the moms group in my neighborhood, I live in Lower Manhattan, does not allow dads to join. So I was not going to connect with moms as part of a formal group, but I could connect with them on the playground or at music class.
And then how did that turn into you deciding at some point to push forward with this idea of getting other or finding other and then getting other stay-at-home dads together in groups?
It really wasn't me. A buddy that I was teaching with, and the way that he'll tell the story is that he followed in my footsteps about 3 years after me being at home full time. He was a teacher at the same school. He went to our principal and said, "I'm going to follow in Matt's footsteps and stay home for some time with my son." And so he, right after his wife came back from maternity leave, called me up and said, "What have you been doing in New York? Everything is for moms. Every class is called Mommy and Me. The play groups are for moms. Everything's written for moms." And I, of course, said, "I've been hanging out with moms and I've been hanging out with lots of nannies and haven't thought too much about it." And he really thought that we could do better. There must be some other dads that were out there at home with their kids. So he was really the force that got us started. And I was member number 2 of our NYC Dads group. And pretty soon after, we agreed that we would do this together.
And he is still involved as well, or how has that gone over the years?
Yes, we've been running this together. First in New York, the first about 5 years, it was just NYC Dads group. And about 6 years ago, we had some guys moving around the country, leaving New York and wanting to recreate the experience of having a dads group. So they're asking for advice. And eventually we landed up, let's not just give advice, let's kind of invest in groups together. So Chicago Dads Group and LA Dads Group were our first groups outside of New York, and trying to create that community for dads, and not just at-home dads. We wanted to create community for dads, whether we were working or at home, whether we were single or married, whether we were gay or straight, whether we were black or white. We wanted to kind of use that bond of fatherhood in each of these cities to connect and get to know each other.
It started with just a few cities, and now what is the number of cities where someone might find your group?
As of this moment, it's 40. By next week, it'll be 41, and a few more in the hopper. It's been neat to see it we didn't have a master plan for taking over the United States and being in every city. We really try to we create groups and give guys an opportunity to come say we want this in our community. We don't have any reason to be in one specific city or another. We just want guys that are really committed and motivated to creating something beyond themselves, creating a community, creating a resource that is to the benefit of the dads around them.
And there must be many advantages of all of these different cities being connected through city dads groups. What would you say are the main ones that really make it valuable to continue to spread what you're doing as opposed to some other dad somewhere else just starting their own group?
I think what I like most is that we can really learn from each other. We can really inspire each other. We can motivate each other. It's lonely. It can be lonely doing this on your own, even if you've got a couple guys as part of your team in one city. It's nice to know what Brock is doing in Cincinnati, or what Mike is doing in San Francisco, or what Sean is doing in Puget Sound. It's neat to hear about what's working for them. It's neat to see what their questions are as they're launching and remembering. Hey, I remember that when we were launching the group. So really, it's this feeling that we're not in this on our own, and really we're trying to create something common for dads across the United States, but unique to the city that we're in.
Once a new city gets off the ground and running, is there a lot of communication or need to interact with them, or once they go, are they pretty well set most of the time to just kind of take care of it themselves?
It's a balance. We don't want to micromanage the groups, but we do want to feel like we, like I said, are invested in this with them. So we're trying to provide resources. We're trying to be there to answer questions, give tips. But really, the success of a group comes down to what they take with the foundation that we set up, and what they do with the foundation that we set up, and how they run with it. And each personality is different. Each guy has different interests. Our Charlotte Dads group just started their own podcast because they were interested in connecting with their community in a different way. Different groups are trying workshops, they're trying newsletters, they're trying other things that we haven't tried that isn't common across the board. So it's really taking what we hand them and seeing where it goes.
Then you probably can speak better about what's happening in New York. If someone comes across City Dads Group in New York for the first time, what do they present it with, and what do you get the sense that they really are learning for the first time and seeing for the first time that they had no idea that they could maybe do this with their kids or with other dads?
Some of it is just the idea of meeting with other dads at all. Like you become a father doesn't mean you automatically look for other dads to connect with. A mother, on the other hand, knows that there's going to be support networks across, or many support networks. Dads don't even know to look for it. So just the idea that there's an opportunity to meet up with some dads for a beer, or meet up at the playground, or to go to a museum. I keep saying, or I've been saying more recently, that the city is also kind of part of our group. We have this opportunity to experience the city with a group of people, and maybe we'll get to do things that we wouldn't be able to do on their own. We've gotten blocks of tickets to go to Broadway shows and to baseball games, amusement parks, and just the fact that we are a collective, we happen to be dads and kids, is what got us in the door. But I remember especially when I was most active going to meetups, we were going to places that I wouldn't have gone otherwise. New York is an amazing city with a million different things to do. But if we had a meetup at a park in Queens that I'd never been to, that was a great opportunity to get out of my little bubble and experience something new.
The commonality seems to be dads, but with the events where the kids join the dads, the kids can be of all ages, boy, girl, whatever, maybe siblings. Are the events tailored to certain age groups at times, or do you get situations where you got all kinds of dads and all kinds of kids at different ages and a really diverse group of people and just different age kids?
Yeah, it really depends on what we're doing. Sometimes it's just dads on our own meeting up for a beer. Other times it's Wednesday morning in Central Park, and there's a limited type of or scope of who has kids available at 10 a.m. on a Wednesday. So it's mostly young kids, but we get invited to a Broadway show for families. You could have we will have people from across the New York City area, kids of all ages. In many cases, we'll invite the whole family. Moms get to join too sometimes. But
you're not anti-mom here in the
we
city.
are definitely not anti-mom. We actually, moms are our best friend, because it's often moms who are pushing their partner towards our group. They see something about us, or we're connected to their mom's group in some way, and they're suggesting that we're out here for dads.
I noticed on your website, as I mentioned to you just before we started recording, that you've had a number of media appearances. And I just read the article that appeared just prior to the event in Minneapolis in September in the Star Tribune locally, that really, I think, was well written and allowed people to read that for the first time and understand, oh, this is a thing that's going on, and makes a lot of sense. When you have these media appearances, I don't know if you're always involved, but what types of reactions are you getting, and what does that directly lead to often?
Yeah, it's amazing. The media, we've been doing this now for 11 years, and the media appearances have changed. For the first many years, it was we could pretty much count on the fact, especially if it was a story about at-home dads, that there would be a clip from Mr. Mom, the Michael Keaton movie from the 80s, and they would show a clip of a dad changing his kid's diaper, and probably a clip of him vacuuming or doing some sort of household chore. And it was very formulaic, kind of this idea that it's new for dads to be doing these tasks, and how great it is for this guy to be pushing his kids on the playground. And I think more recently, it's become much more common for maybe not a dad to be home full time, but for a dad to be very actively engaged in everything related to parenting. So certainly not abnormal for a dad to be changing a diaper. Certainly not abnormal for a dad to be making dinner for his family. So I think the media has caught on, and we've tried to be an active part of getting them to see us as we are. We're not kind of buffoons that can't handle the normal everyday tasks of taking care of a baby or a family or a home. We are struggling. We're not perfect, but so are moms, and we're trying to be good partners and good husbands and fathers.
So you're saying the media portrays you probably much more fairly these days. Do these media appearances give spikes to either the membership in some of your cities, or possibly land on cities that didn't know you existed and get a club started soon thereafter?
Yeah, it depends. I think I was just talking to somebody about this today, actually. There's dads, they don't know that this resource is out there. So the first time they hear about it, it might make them go, Second time they hear about it, they think, oh, maybe I keep hearing about it. Maybe I'll join. Third, fourth, fifth time, maybe they'll join. Sixth, seventh, eighth time, maybe they'll come out to a meetup. So a media appearance kind of is another opportunity, another touch point for somebody to hear about us. We try to really become ingrained in each of the city's kind of family scene. We want the Children's Museum to know about us. We want the zoo to know about us. We want the moms groups to know about us, and the mom bloggers to know about us. So dads can hear about us through a variety of channels. A local piece like the one that you're talking about in Minneapolis definitely leads to guys joining the group. We've been lucky enough to be in the New York Times and on the Today Show and Good Morning America and all these national media channels. And that's, I'd say, more of an opportunity to share the narrative about what dads are and who we are, more than it is to get guys joining our groups. We'll get a few, but it's more about opening people's minds, I think, to what families in 2019 look like.
Another form of media, and the one that connects us today, a podcast. Of course, I have this podcast, and I've been checking out a few of the episodes of the Modern Dads podcast. And of course, you mentioned one of the cities, I think you said somewhere in the Southeast it was starting their own podcast there. But the Modern Dads podcast, listen to a few episodes, your voice comes on in the beginning, and then it seems like you have other people involved most of the time, and some authors and different people joining. What happens often from your perspective on the Modern Dads podcast, and what do you really try to get out of that?
I love it. So we've been doing it now we're entering our 7th season this fall, and I love it because I love meeting new people and giving voice to people that have done something amazing. So whether someone's written a book, or they've conducted a study, or they just have a unique perspective on the world, I've loved having the opportunity to share that with our audience. It used to be that authors contacted us 10 years ago and they said, I have a book, I'm going to be coming through New York, can we sit down with your group? And we'd say sure, and we'd have a great meetup of 10 to 12 dads talking about the latest author, about whatever, work life or parenting or whatever came up. And now we have this opportunity to talk to experts on the podcast and share them with our audience. It's not a huge audience, but it's bigger than a Barnes and Noble book talk or a meetup with our group. So it's been neat. I like having conversations with people that are really passionate about their work.
And for me, having you today, I often talk on my podcast about, I bring people on my show often because they've influenced my thinking or my actions. I'm not so sure so much you've had a great influence on me yet. It does for my future, potentially, knowing that if I ever were to have children, then this is a thing I'd be thinking about from the get-go if it made sense in that situation. But more so, obviously, you and the others involved have had a great influence on many dads throughout the country, and then their family lives and everything like that. So I see you as a person of great influence, and I'm happy that you're joining me today. Do you find any stories that really jump out at you from people that you've met of how they've described how this has changed their lives, having this group available to them?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little, some of the stories are a little sad. Men, especially when they get married, they become fathers. If they're working full time, it's hard to have anything else in your life. So to even think about going out or meeting friends kind of falls away. So we've had guys come out for a dad's night out and say, this is the first time in 2 years that I've been out by myself, or 4 years that I've been out by myself. And just the opportunity to connect with people that they that had fallen out of their lives, and happy to be there for that. And I think just in general, again, this idea that dads don't really think that they can seek advice from other dads, that there are their dad friend, they don't have dad friends, or they don't think their dad friends have any expertise on an issue. So to offer this resource of support has been really great. We don't frame a meetup around thinking about usually thinking about what is your kid eating every night. But certainly if you meet a dad and you see that the kid is eating sushi, and you say, how did you get your kid to eat sushi? And it becomes a real source of information and connection. So I think that's neat to see. And I personally have just met dads of all stripes, people that I would never have met. And I think that's what we're doing. We're again, this connection that we have. We're fathers. We may be single, we may be straight or gay, we may be poor or rich, but we're all trying to be the best dads that we can be. And it's neat to meet people that are kind of dedicated to that cause.
And now let's speak directly to the dad or the many dads that are hearing about this for the first time through our conversation right now. You have citydadsgroup.com, City Dads Group on many of the other social media platforms. But let's just say we direct someone to citydadsgroup.com. What should they look for right away? And what's the best way from there to meet up with other people?
Certainly click the cities tab to see if you're in one of the 40 cities where we have groups. That the heart of our experience is about meeting up in real life with other dads, and that's what we're trying to create in these 40 cities. Our website is also where our blog is. We've got dads from our community posting their stories. Some of them are funny, some of them are poignant, sad, anger-filled rants, but they're all the experience of a diverse group of dads. That's where you can find our podcast and social media channels as well. But really, the heart of it is about how do you connect with the dads where you are.
I found your blog on there, and the most recent post was Halloween related, as we were recording this just a couple days before Halloween. And there's a lot of jokes on there. I don't know that they made me laugh so much, but I imagine a lot of those will come in handy for the dads telling to their kids.
Yes, dad jokes have become a meme, world renowned. So I haven't actually read that post. That was written by our blog editor Kevin McKeever, and he's a funny guy. He's been a dad for a long time, and he brought out all the good stuff for this post.
I can imagine the dads and the kids really having a fun time with a number of those jokes as a way to tie this group into the holidays. So I'd imagine, okay, that happens at Halloween. As other holidays roll throughout the year, there's probably a lot of reasons that this helps a dad. What might those be? What comes to mind when I suggest that, other holidays?
Well, I think it's other holidays. It's just in general, when you have a dad writing from his perspective, we want all these perspectives so that you can find connection. A dad with a child that has autism is connecting with other dads. A dad with a child, or a black dad talking about the experience of getting his children ready to go out into the world is connecting with other dads. So that's kind of the heart of it, is recognizing that you're not alone, and there's these stories are out there. But I mean, we've been doing this for a long time now, so certainly month to month, the same kinds of things come up. We're coming into November every year. We many of us participate in Movember. It's a mustache growing campaign to benefit men's health issues. So I'll be, for the 9th year, growing a mustache, which does not go well for me, and everybody laughs. But I've raised, I think, $15,000 to $20,000 over the last 9 years to benefit men's cancer research and mental health research and that kind of stuff. So it's fun to see kind of these cycles of things come around every year, and yeah, it's also fun to laugh at some of this stuff.
So is Movember the least favorite time of the year for your wife, if you're talking about your mustache not coming in so well?
That's you picked up on it. She absolutely hates every minute of November and of Movember, and I'm shaving the moment the clock strikes midnight.
That's awesome. I think this is a good time to transition into getting to know a little bit more about you. Each episode, I have my personal growth segment. And with that, as I primed you a little bit, Matt, it's an opportunity for you to share whatever it is that you feel useful to talk about for yourself, but maybe most importantly for anyone out in the listening audience to hear, as ways that you are growing as a person or have grown as a person that someone else might not have considered before and would find useful to hear. So when I talk about that, what comes to mind for you?
You know, what I have been really focused on, especially as I've been broadening my community, broadening the type of people that I get to meet and hang out with, is really understanding people's perspectives. And I feel like you really have to meet people and get to know people in order to be in their shoes and to recognize kind of some of the limitations that you have on your own thinking. So race is a good example for me. I consider myself fairly woke, to use a term that I probably shouldn't be using, but I can't begin to understand what it's like to be a father of an African American child, or to be an African American man. So I've spent a lot of time reading and trying to gain perspective and really think about the experience of growing up Black, having your ancestors be Black, and what they've been through. And I think that has opened my mind up in different ways. I go out and as I meet new people and connect with existing friends and community, that's been good. We're living at a time where we're having conversations that we should have been having a long time ago. And there's a lot going wrong in this day and age, but I do think that raising some of these issues, getting people thinking about some of these issues around race or gender, um, really have been a benefit to me, and an opportunity that I've taken to read and to hear people's stories, to watch documentaries that are getting made, and really try to gain an understanding. It used to be that I would maybe be one of those people that claim to not see race and not worry about whether somebody was Black or Latino or white, and just take them for who they are as an individual, which I think I've learned that you can't discount someone's history and their ancestry from understanding who they are. So understanding somebody as a Black man or a Latino woman or a gay woman is part of who they are. So trying to broaden my mind and really do the work to understand people and where they're coming from.
And you were talking of your experiences. I imagine this type of thing is happening through City Dads Group and all sorts of groups throughout the country or even the world, that when you see someone and you can only find differences with them, I think that sets up the situation where maybe there is this division. But with City Dads Group, every time dads of a different whatever description you might want to come up with, whether it's race or religion or sexuality, they come together. They recognize they both are dads. They have this thing in common. And once you have the common ground, it's very much easier to begin to see the similarities. Yes, there's going to be differences. There's always differences, but see that to the core, you're both dads, for instance. And then from there, you can probably form some pretty good bonds.
Right. And that's, I think, to me, what has kept me going. And I think the most important thing that we're doing is getting people together in real life. We could have created a dad's group that's entirely online, and Facebook group, private groups where everybody's talking to each other there. But I think we are in need of connecting with people in real life. And I think what people will say to your face is different than what they'll say to you from behind their computer. But B, you don't really get to know somebody until you're with them in a space, and seeing them interact with their children or and their family. And again, yeah, you can find common ground with somebody, and really embrace that common ground and not worry about all those things that make you shockingly different.
As I just ponder this a bit more as you're describing it, I do realize better what you're saying, because on the average, say, workplace or wherever you come across someone that may be different in some way, you can connect with that person. But here, with the opportunity to connect both as dads, and then maybe oftentimes see that other dad parent their child who is also different in whatever ways from your own child, and just kind of taking that all together, it's adding a whole nother layer that does really allow for some understanding, I'd imagine.
Yeah, and so much of what we see about parenting these days is looking at something like Instagram and seeing the perfect vacation pictures or the perfect dinner that you just cooked. You don't see any of that when you're together at a meetup. You're seeing what people are like in real life, and sometimes they're having beautiful moments with their children as you sit and watch a puppet show or whatever event we're at. Other times you're seeing that child have a meltdown. You're seeing that dad get frustrated and maybe even yelling at his child. And you're saying, it's tough. This is tough. And it's tough for him. It's tough for me. It's tough for the next guy. And so having those experiences together, I think does connect. And seeing that others are struggling regardless of their background is helpful.
As in keeping in this topic for a bit longer here, you mentioned 14 years that you've been the stay-at-home dad, which means your kids are probably, I suppose, getting closer to those ages where you won't need to stay at home anymore, or who knows what'll happen from there. both with the parenting and then with the City Dads Group. What are your thoughts right now as you grow and see these different opportunities? What's going to happen with you when this is no longer a need?
Well, it's interesting. Yeah, I get asked this question a lot, and I've been asked this question. I've been home for 14 years. My children are 14 and 11, and certainly there are times when I could have gone back to work along the way, and they would be just fine. If I would have worked from the beginning, they would have been just fine. We would have worked out that life as well. With City Dads Group, I created something that kind of fueled a passion and fueled kind of a professional endeavor that, from a life standpoint, I didn't need to return to work to feel good about my place in the world. I'm also in a financial position, or we are in a financial position, where my wife's work supports our family. So I'm in that privileged position of not needing to return to work to contribute to our life financially. And I will say, and I keep saying, that being an at-home dad now is as important for my kids, I feel like, or maybe even more important than it was when they were babies. Being here when they get home to kind of check in with them, seeing how their day was, just even a little bit, I think makes a difference. My oldest just started high school this year. My youngest just started middle school this year. So being here during these times of transition has been positive and comforting for both my wife and I to have one of us focused on this time. Again, it's a privileged place to be, but it's also a place we've planned for and aligned our lives to, because we feel like it's important.
As this is the personal growth segment, personal growth topic, talking about your growth, but being able to be stay-at-home dad and work with this group for so many years, how does that then play into your parenting style personally, by having just more time to focus on parenting and less time distracted by whatever job responsibilities you'd have that would be totally unrelated to your parenting? How has that played into your growth as a parent, as an individual?
Well, this is all I've ever known. So I never had the office job or the outside work. So this is all I've ever known, and I can get easily distracted by this work, and I've needed to, and all of my work that I do with City Dads Group is at home. The podcast is recorded from my home office. The managing our sponsors, all this work is done at home. So really, I've had to find boundaries and figured out that when my kids are here, I need to get them settled in before I return to work. I can't kind of be on the edge of that. So it's in many ways very similar to having a job that you have to figure out how to be a parent in one moment and be working at another moment. The fact that I've been able to be out in the world talking about fatherhood does not necessarily make me or certainly doesn't make me a better father than the next guy. I've gotten to have some great conversations. I get to be here for my kids, but running a dad's group, we always say that does not make us better fathers than the next guy. And certainly being at home with my kids, I also say, it does not make me a better father than the guy that's out working full time. And I think that's we all have our role. We're all trying to do the best we can. And my wife certainly wouldn't say that she's less capable and competent as a parent than I am, just because she's the one at work all day while I'm the one that is figuring out lunch and making doctor's appointments and scheduling camp and all of that kind of stuff.
Let's switch over now to the Being Wrong segment. This one comes from really the reason that I have this podcast is me looking through my life and things that have changed my mind about greatly, things that I could say that the previous version of myself was wrong about. I know not everyone looks at wrongness the same way, but about changing your mind. When I brought up this topic, this segment, is there something that really struck you of one of the biggest changing of your mind in your life, and how you could tell a former version of yourself that you were wrong?
Yeah, and it's related to my personal growth as well. I had the opportunity to get a master's in early childhood education before my kids were born, and I was doing it in a context where I was teaching full time during the day and going to school at night with a bunch of other people in this program. So thousands of people in New York City were participating in a program doing this. And it was a very diverse group of people, probably the most diverse group of people in an educational context that I had ever been part of. And we were all teaching in hard to serve or high needs schools. My school where I was teaching was mostly Dominican kids and Puerto Rican kids. Other kids were teaching in other parts of the city that had a diverse population. So I was in class with people also of different ages. But I remember one conversation that I will never forget, that I was entirely wrong. But a woman asserted, an African-American woman asserted that times are just as hard for Black people now as they were through history, had been through civil rights movement, through slavery, through all of the things that were going on. And in my mind, from my perspective, at 15 years ago, I could not fathom that, and I said it out loud. I said, "How could that be?" I questioned her from her point of view, saying, offering her life experience and her perspective. I questioned her and asserted all the ways why that wasn't true, rather than just listening to her. And I thought about the conversation. I thought about the conversation in the years after, but I find myself thinking about that conversation more and more lately as we start to understand and more stories get told. We're not talking about what America has become. We're talking about what America has always been, and we're finally hearing the stories of people. And life is hard for a lot of different groups of people, and we really need to step outside the world that we're living in and recognize and listen a lot more than we're talking.
Yeah, I was just thinking that story is about race relations and understanding, but mostly it's just about listening and not hearing someone say something and thinking that you might know more than them or have something better to say. Everyone's opinions, perhaps, in these conversations are worth listening to, but before we rush to say what we know, just listen. Take as much time as needed to listen to someone else, and that seems to be what I'm gathering from that.
Well, and nobody's life experience should ever be up for debate. So that, I mean, people telling their story and making offering their opinion isn't really something that we should be debating.
Thank you for sharing that, Matt Schneider. Winding down our conversation today. Obviously, I'll be posting into the show notes all the relevant links so that people can find you and City Dads Group. Is there anything else that you want to offer or to say about our conversation? Something that maybe we've left out that you find important?
No, and I really like what you're doing with this project. We happened to meet in I think it was Uber. I was using Uber that day.
Okay.
I think I have been trying even more lately. I've always been the type of person that I like to hear people's stories, but I always leave open in a situation like that. And Uber, we had 20, 30 minutes together, and you never know what the stories are going to be. And very often people have a story that's well beyond the circumstance that you're meeting them. So like what you're doing with this project, and like that we had the chance to meet.
Thank you for that. And it reminds me, I heard this recently that, so commonly it's easy just to kind of shut down and keep to yourself and do your own thing. But those are the situations, whether it's the person you're sitting next to on an airplane, and often I'm so tired, I don't even want to start a conversation, or in the Uber or the Lyft or so many other places that we've gained these habits to just not interact with the people around us. Imagine if we just forced ourselves to 5 times as frequently or something, whatever number we give it to interact. Imagine all the different people we meet and the connections we make. And I guess this can be an example for those taking in our conversation that, yeah, maybe you should start a conversation sometime and see what comes from it.
And I think you have to read the situation sometimes, and you can tell when somebody's not interested in having a conversation. I never force it, but you throw out the opportunity, you be open to the opportunity, and you never know what stories are going to get told.
Wonderful. I'm glad that led to this. And Matt Schneider, I thank you for joining me today.
Thank you.